As you travel along a spiritual journey, eventually you reach a point where you start to experience tenderness. And it's not a bad thing. It's a very, very good thing. It's healing to cry. It's not about sadness. It's not about things that make you unhappy. It's about gratitude. Because you're starting to get in touch with an energy that you, I'll say for myself, heretofore worked very hard to ignore. And it's called the vibration of love. You get more and more in touch with this vibration. And then you begin to recognize it everywhere you look. So you'll see me doing this a lot. So you'll have to forgive me. But today I look out in the audience, and it's Father's Day, and I see my daughter, right? And my grandchildren, my son-in-law. And I feel this great energy of love. And for all the parents in this room and for the fathers today, I want to celebrate you. So I know we had some balloons back there, but I wanted to just blow a balloon for you. And I just wanted to celebrate you. Well, isn't it interesting? If we could understand the way things work, if I could figure out how to hold on to a balloon, I could do better. If I could figure out how that balloon actually flies, I could learn how to fly an airplane. Just a few principles, very small principles, in fact. One of those was called Boyle's Law. Are there any pilots in the room? I know there are a couple of pilots in the community, or at least one other one, because I've talked to some, but one small principle that you can identify that helps you understand how that balloon just did what it did. It flies. And so when I ask people, I say, how does that work? Is it the air coming out the end of it that causes it to move through the room? And some people say, well, yeah, it's pushing against the air outside of it. But if I let go of it in outer space, will it still fly? Absolutely. There's no air there. Why would it fly? How does a rocket fly in outer space if what's coming out of the end of it is what causes it to move when there's nothing to push against? For many, many, many thousands of years, hundreds of years, whatever, we just looked at birds and we looked at things that were flying and say, well, we're never going to do that. We're never going to do that. And all we needed to understand was a few small principles to begin to do that. 1903, the Wright brothers began to tap into those principles that today, 100 years later, 115 years later, we can get in an airplane and fly. We can actually have somebody else fly us around the world very quickly. In fact, we put people on the moon. All of that just from understanding a very few small principles. One of those principles was Boyle's Law, which said the increase in velocity, decrease in pressure. That's just one principle. But if you get that, you can fly an airplane. Is it reasonable to say that everyone in this room can fly an airplane? Is that a reasonable statement? Would you agree with me if I said absolutely? Because it can be learned. It's a learned behavior. You can learn how to do that. You just need to understand the principles. Yes? So let's say you're flying with someone in a small airplane. My grandson's here. He flew with me one of the first time. I took him, one of the very first people that ever flew with me when I got my pilot's license. It didn't take him, we barely got off the runway and he started throwing up the first time. And he had grape juice or something that morning. It wasn't pretty, right? But I loved it. I wanted to share with him what I was experiencing. And I was learning new skills. I was learning about a system that when you understand the principles of it, you can do some amazing things. So let's say you're flying with someone and then for whatever reason, they pass out. Can you land that airplane? Can you land that airplane? If you did, would you think that was a miracle? Yeah. Yeah, we could say that was a miracle, right? But if you had studied like the pilot had studied, and you learned the principles that work, then you would be miracle ready, right? Because if something happened, you would know how to do what you need to do because you would understand how it works. You'd understand the principles. And about the same time that the Wright brothers were beginning to understand the principles of flight that we all take pretty much for granted today. And by the way, your beautiful Reverend Claudia, and congratulations on your decision, by the way, to bring her into your community. I like that. She was horrified to fly, horrified. And for years, that was her job. I'm like, and she would get on the plane and she would bless the bolts. She would bless the tires. She would bless the pilots. She got on the plane, she would believe in that she was flying the plane. And if she didn't stay in prayer and stay conscious that the plane wouldn't work, or she may not survive. Now, someone that might be sitting next to who understood the principles, I mean, they could have faith because they understood how things work. See, having faith is understanding how it works so that you know that the outcome is certain. Faith isn't about hoping it'll turn out a certain way. Miracles are not about hoping something's going to happen. Faith is knowing how it works. And so when you apply the principles and understand what they are, then the miracles just happen all the time. They're happening all around you, everywhere. It's amazing. And that's called miracle mindedness, miracle readiness. So we could say that about that same time, when the Wright brothers took off for the first time for just 4 minutes, right? The founder of this community, Center for Spiritual Living, was Ernest Holmes. He was 16 years old. 16 years old. But he had already begun to understand some principles, some new principles that carry forth now in our community today, that we teach and talk about and discuss and live by today. That was 115 years ago. But it was his parents. If you study a little bit, if you read up a little bit, you'll find out it was his father that after going to a traditional Christian church, a Baptist church, I think that we went to, when the preacher was talking about a God that was being judgmental and wrathful and jealous and hateful and punishing, he would tell his son, his whole son, his sons, his family, and his mother too agreed completely, wholeheartedly. That's just not the way we see God. God is not those things. God is not something to fear. Never fear God. That was the admonition that he had gotten from his parents, never to fear God. Check it out. 100 years later, that's what we're teaching here. Why would we fear love unless we don't understand it? So understanding love, God is love. Understanding love is what this teaching is about and what this community is about. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Ernest Holmes was that one of his greatest influence was Emerson, and he was obviously a philosopher. Emerson was, so he was reading and studying. He actually started going to school when he was about 17, and about that same time he quit going to school because he couldn't agree with what he was learning. And so he was a voracious reader and read literally hundreds and hundreds of books. I have a tremendous respect for someone that will dedicate themselves to learning something new. And yes, you can learn how to fly an airplane. Everyone here can do that. And also everyone here can learn how to evolve consciously to a state of consciousness that other people can't grasp, can't understand, don't know how it works. And so when you say something as simple as the reading, and thank you for going on such a beautiful job on the reading today. The very first sentence of that reading is, in each and every moment, you cannot be a victim. Who can agree with that? I mean, look at the news. It's everywhere. Look at all the victim consciousness, if you will, that controls and rules our everyday thinking. The Judeo-Christian influence is pervasive. And around the world, this consciousness called victim consciousness permeates 78% of our world population. We're going to be talking about that this week. Actually, we've got a class coming up, the levels of consciousness 1 and 2. We're going to be talking about this roadmap to different levels of consciousness. So you can actually see that there is a roadmap. There is a way that you can get that sucker off the runway and into the air. You got to understand how it works. And these are principles that are timeless. These are principles that are eternal. In each and every moment, you cannot be a victim. How does that work? Because that sounds so ridiculous. All I've got to do is look around and I can see victims are everywhere. There's war, there's poverty, there's murder, there's hatred, there's lack of love. How could that be true? And we used to say, how could birds fly? We didn't understand very basic principles. And they're simple. They're hard to accept at first. It was hard for us to accept that we could actually fly. It was even harder when my grandfather was 94 years old when they landed on the moon. And I remember him telling my grandmother, Dolly, her name was Mama Doll, lived in Lebanon, Tennessee. He said, Dolly, he got angry. He said, turn that off. 94 years old. And, he would walk to town every day and they would swap knives and whittle. And the old boys would sit around and just chat. He'd walk a mile and a half, go downtown, and they would just sit there on the square and whittle cedar and chat and talk. He said, Dolly, turn that off. There ain't no way in hell that we're going to the moon. It's impossible. It was not comprehensible to him that we could land somebody on the moon. It was beyond his comprehension. I can't teach my cat to drive my car. I've tried. Actually, I was trying to get it to scoop its own poop, but it wouldn't do that either. It's beyond his comprehension. And there are things that we have limited ourselves to. Yes, we have limited ourselves to because we chose to come here for this fourth dimensional experience, right? 4 dimensions, height, width, depth, and time. And we're limited just for those 4 dimensions, but you're a multidimensional being. Oh, you are way more than you're giving yourself credit for. I promise you that. But until you step up the ladder a little bit, until you get it off the runway, till you get up to a little bit higher level, you can't really begin to grasp the beautiful view that's there and awaits you. You've got to do the work. You've got to do the work. In each and every moment, you cannot be a victim of what you see, and nothing is outside of you. It's so profound, but we brush over it because we don't possibly, some of us at least, I know I didn't for my whole life, until I began to journey on this spiritual pathway that I'm on with you, that I couldn't grasp it. But now it's like butter. It just sings to me. I have power. I am that I am. You are perfect, neither behind the point of perfection nor advancing toward it, and must see yourself therefrom. You have to begin, since you've been pretending to be human, it's time to start pretending to be your true self again. To remember who you are, you have to begin to pretend, practice, and be that. You have to start being the pilot of your own plane. You have to begin to reclaim your freedom because you're not bound to the ground. You have to take the steps. You have to do the work. You have to study a little bit, come to some classes, whatever you need to do, but get the answers that you need. And that's what I loved about Ernest Holmes, because he was open at the top. You've heard that before, right? He was open at the top. I was watching Reverend Claudia last week, and she was doing her hopper thing, And she uses that same expression when she says, open at the top. What does that mean? Well, I want to use the Wright brothers kind of as an example, because 100 years ago, it was a historical event because we got off the ground for 4 minutes. And then not too long ago, my friends, because that was only 115 years ago. Not too long after that, we put a man on the moon. 100 years ago, our forefathers, the ones that we stand on their shoulders today, began to grasp the principles of how it works, what works. The science of mind. The science of mind. Another way of putting it that I'd like to share with you today, to just give it a little upgrade, so to speak, or a little finesse, is to say the art of thought. Because it's about your thinking. That's where the work is. If you understand how you're thinking, because you are the extension of creation, so you're a creator. And how does creation happen? Creation happens as ideas, as thoughts. And so every thought is a thought of creation. And so you are a very powerful creator. So the art of thought then is what we want to share with you, what we hope to share with you, so that once you grasp how powerful you are, you begin to see how you're setting yourself up and keeping yourself bound and not free, because you're practicing, you're using the art, but you're not using it with skill. You can create a perfect life. Whoa. Yeah. Sounds like a miracle. Because it is. So what is a miracle, Tony? What is a miracle? A miracle is, I'm going to say, like almost everything that I have come exposed to, is not what the world defines it as. That something happened unexpected, we didn't know what it was, and it couldn't possibly happen. It was impossible, but it happened, so that makes it a miracle because it was impossible. Well, that's one way of defining it, but that's not an appropriate way of defining it. An appropriate way of defining it is understanding that a miracle is nothing more than a shift of perception. It's a shift of thought. Out of the thought of fear that you cannot fly into the certainty of knowing, because you've been practicing doing it and you've gotten the skills and you can understand how it works, that absolutely you can perform miracles. And those around you and all of us here, we're ready to receive your miracles, right? We're certainly ready to join with you in the process. You and I, all of us, we are miracle workers. It's very simple. Every time we withhold judgment, doesn't sound too hard, right? Try it. Takes practice. Remember when I first started learning how to fly, I was going around and landing, taking off, 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 withholding judgment, withholding judgment, withholding judgment. Somebody says something to me and I'm going to withhold judgment on that one. It's simple. That doesn't make it easy, because you have to work at it. You have to practice. Eventually, I don't want to take too long here, but eventually when I was learning to fly, I finally got brave enough, because I understood the way things work. I could sit next to somebody on an airplane and comfort them. I couldn't try to explain them how the plane works. I could just try to hold their hand and be present with them and say, it's going to be okay. Because I had perfect faith that the airplane knows what to do. It works on principle. And I could hold their hand and say, you're going to be okay. Everything's going to be, I could be loving and not judgmental and not make fun of them because they didn't know what I know. Oh, I'm smarter than you. I know how this works. No. I could just be loving. I could respond. Not being responsible, but I could be loving. So we can do this, right? We can practice a little bit. We can learn these principles. But I wouldn't take you up for the first time on an aerobatic flight and go up as high as we can till the plane stalls out and then it falls out of the sky. I mean, you probably wouldn't want that experience the first time out, right? Right? So be careful what you ask for. Oh, I want everything to change. No, you say, I want things to be better, but don't change anything, right? So we have to change. But it's not somebody else doing something to you. It's you changing what you're willing to do, what you're willing to commit to. And it's not painful. Well, it is kind of painful to let go of all your, long-term commitments to the ideas of you believing what you believe. But learning something new and allowing somebody else to be your teacher, other than being your own teacher, allowing somebody else to be your teacher. I had an instructor when I started to learn how to fly. After eventually, I didn't need the instructor anymore. We're learning something new. And it is a miracle. It's called Miracle Readiness. And I'm thrilled to be a part of this community. I'm thrilled to be marrying this beautiful lady. I'm very thrilled about that. And we are excited to be here with you in this space. And I want to say thank you for letting me talk with you this morning.